Good morning, everyone. I'm Auntie Kara, but this video is not for kids. This is a video for grown-ups who love fairy tales. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorites, The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. This book is a 4-book series. I've read the whole thing. I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to go into any details other than this one, though, today, because I feel like it's such a good series that the later books, particularly Wintersmith, I really loved, so I might do a video on that just on its own in the future. But this is a book about Tiffany Aching, and it's kind of a coming-of-age story. She starts off very much in that child stage, and kind of through the series of books, she goes through that teenage transition. But if you love fairy tales, this is the book for you. Terry Prachet wrote it with his daughter in mind, so it's full of magical, dreamlike kingdoms and evil queens and all that sort of stuff. It's very positive in its portrayal of women, of witches. If anyone has read Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, you know it is full of magic and wonderful messages and life wisdom and beautiful imagery and very involved mythology. Like, who doesn't like a world of a disc flying on top of elephants and stuff like that, you know? So I highly recommend this book. Probably my favorite part of this book, though, other than Tiffany herself and the way the witches are and just their sass and their attitude and the way magic is portrayed, is the Nakamic-Feagles. So the Nakamic-Feagles are these race of fairy-like creatures, but they're not what most people think of when you say the word fairy. They're very rough around the edges. They're these little blue kind of creatures that speak with almost a Scottish-ish UK accent, and their speech is written phonetically, so you really get a sense of how they sound and how they talk in their own vernacular. And you know, they're stinky and they're dirty and they love whiskey and they get offended when people leave them cream and they want alcohol instead. And they love nothing more than to fight and steal and drink. And they think that this world is heaven because there's so many things to fight and steal and drink. So they're quite an interesting little folk, and they kind of become Tiffany's guardians. And it's one of those things, a friend of mine once described it to me that, like, anytime anyone else in Discworld talks about Nakamic-Feagles, it's like, ooh, Nakamic-Feagles, why do you want those around? But they really protect her, and they call her the wee hag, which is, hag is the word they use for witch. And they really play a big part of driving the story forward, and they're always there adding a bit of comic relief to it. And their sense of loyalty and friendship is quite good. Like, they have really big hearts for such wee little lads. So the 2 excerpts I'm going to read to you today center around Nakamic-Feagles because I just love them so much. But there's so much more to this book as well, and I think I'll give you a little bit of a taste. So let's dive in. So this section, when I read it the first time, I had to go back to see if what I was reading was actually what I thought I was reading, because it's just so ridiculous and so funny and so vivid. You know, she said, magic is a lot more complicated than I thought. Flappity flappity flat, cheep cheep, ack, poor wee me, cheepity cheep. Tiffany ran over to the window. There was a feagle on the path. It had made itself some crude wings out of a piece of rag and a kind of beaky cap out of a straw, and was wobbling around in a circle like a wounded bird. Ack, cheepity cheep, flutter, fluttery flutter. I certainly hope there's not a pussycat around. Ack, dearie me, it yelled. And down the path Ratbag, arch enemy of all baby birds, the cat, sulked closer, dribbling. As Tiffany opened her mouth to yell, he leaped and landed with all 4 feet on the little man, or at least where the little man had been, because he had somersaulted in mid-air and was now right in front of Ratbag's face and had grabbed a cat ear with each hand. Ack, see you pussycat, scunner that yar, he yelled. There's a gifty from wee birdies, ye schemy. He butted the cat hard on the nose. Ratbag spun in the air and landed on his back with his eyes crossed. He squinted in cold terror as the little man leaned down at him and shouted, "Cheep!" Then he levitated in the way that cats do and became a ginger streak rocketing down the path, through the open door and shooting past Tiffany to hide under the sink. The Feagle looked up, grinning, and saw Tiffany. "Please don't go," she began quickly, but he went in a blur. So that was the intro to the Knack McFeagles. And the reason they did that is because they overheard Tiffany say she wishes her cat would leave the birds alone. So that was their solution. Quite silly creatures. All right. So this is a section where they talk about their view of the afterlife. "You're dead?" said Tiffany. She looked around. Feagles were picking themselves up and grumbling, but no one was going whaley, 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 and Rob Anybody wasn't making any sense at all. "Well, if you think you're dead, then what are they?" she went on, pointing to a couple of small bodies. "Oh, they've gone back to the land of the living," says Rob Anybody cheerfully. "It's nae as good as this one, but they'll be bid fine and come back before too long. No sense in grieving." The Aikens were not very religious, but Tiffany thought she knew how things ought to go, and they started out with the idea that you were alive and not dead yet. "But you are alive," she said. "Ack no, mistress," said Rob, helping another pixie to his feet. "We was alive, and we was good boys back in the land of the living, and so when we died there, we was borned into this place." "You mean, you think that you sort of died somewhere else and then came here?" said Tiffany. "You mean this is like heaven?" "Aye, just as advertised," said Rob Anybody. "Lovely sunshine, good hunting, nice pretty flowers, and wee birdies going cheap." "Aye, and then there's the fighting," said another Feagle. And then they all joined in, "And the stealing, and the drinking, and fighting." "And the kebabs," said Daft Willie. "But there's bad things here," said Tiffany. "There's monsters." "Aye," said Rob, beaming happily. "Grand, isn't it? Everything laid on, even things to fight." "But we live here," said Tiffany. "Ack, well, maybe you humans was good in the last world too," said Rob Anybody generously. "I'll just round up the lads, mistress." So that's your first peek into the Feagles. I highly recommend you pick up this book. I loved it, and I hope that you do too. If you have read it, or if you are going to read it, or if you read it from the suggestion, please let me know what you think. As always, if you love this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Before I go, I'm going to share with you a quote from this book that really stuck with me, but I wasn't able to find it. I searched for a good 2 hours in this book and I couldn't find it, but I did want to share it. And I'll leave you with that as the ending point today. "She couldn't be the prince, and she'd never be a princess, and she didn't want to be a woodcutter, so she'd be the witch and know things." That's all for now. Don't forget to read, and I'll see you next time.